Hello everyone, it's Group 7, Eason, Mia, and Robin. And Wenzhou is an Asian city with a long history, and our group's topic is the recent history of Wenzhou. So our group will briefly introduce the history of Wenzhou in the past 100 years. This timeline briefly summarizes the great events and cultural changes in Wenzhou in the past 100 years. And we will start with the founding of the Republic of China. In 1912, after the Revolution of 1911, the Revolution Party established a provisional government in Nanjing, and the Republic of China was established. Wenzhou was taken over by the new government, and a new Wenzhou Yongjia County government was established. At that time, under the influence of democracy and the Western cultural movements, the lives of all Chinese people have undergone tremendous changes. Many Western cultures, things, and concepts have been introduced into China. And Wenzhou is also affected. In the early days of the Republic of China, the clothing of Wenzhou people began to leave the shackles of Chinese tradition and become more fashionable and convenient. Chinese tunic was widely popular at that time. On May 4, 1990, in order to protest against the unfair results of the Paris Peace Conference, young students and workers in Beijing launched a massive demonstration and other movements, which is the famous May 4th movement. At the same time, students in Wenzhou responded positively to the May 4th movement and published a national weekly relief to boycott Japanese products and prohibit leakage. After the May 4th movement, the new cultural movement reached its peak, and the society promoted the emancipation of ideas. And this emancipation was reflected in literature. Zhou Qu is Wenzhou's most powerful Mandarin advocate, and he is also the editor of Cihai. Under the new culture movement, people gradually abandoned classical Chinese and began to actively learn Mandarin and foreign languages. Wenzhou's literature developed, and Wenzhou began to integrate with the world culture. In 1933, the city map of Yongjia County was published. This area is today's Lucheng district, the old city of Wenzhou. And Wenzhou was planned and expanded on its basis. It can be seen that the old river travels around the urban areas and becomes the context of the entire city. The urban divisions are in order. In 1935, the Chinese Red Army entered southern Zhejiang and became a temporary political commissioner of the Communist Party. In 1937, the Lugo Bridge incident broke out in the northeast. Japan invaded China in all-round way, and the War of the Resistance against Japan started. After Wenzhou incident in 1942, the Zhejiang Provisional Party Committee was destroyed, and the Southern Zhejiang Party organization suffered serious losses. Wenzhou was an active battlefield in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression, and it was famous for the local gatherers. But it experienced three falls during the war. In September 1944, Wenzhou fell for the third time.
This is Mia. I will follow Eason's part on the recent history of Wenzhou. During the Ganni-Japanese War, people's living standards were very poor. They mainly lived by waterways, but they had no running water and convenient water transportation. So Wenzhou has a lab occupation that specialized in carrying water for people at that time. But this occupation quickly disappeared with the popularity of tap water. And time came to 1949. On May 7th, the Chinese People Liberation Army entered Wenzhou and liberated Wenzhou. On August 26th, the Wenzhou government was established. And actually, the People's Square has witnessed the historical development of Wenzhou. In 1960s, it was the site of Yongzhou County government. After 1949, the government transformed it into a square. Since then, it has been called People's Square, and is an important place for people to celebrate great events. And in 1950s, people began to build land transportation, and the water transportation network gradually began to stop. At the same time, people's clothing has changed. Under the influence of communism, Lenin's clothing became popular for a while. And in 1980s, Wenzhou was still a traditional city, and this kind of urban planning was called: the east is the temple, the south is the market, the west is the residence, and the north is the wharf. And in 1979, the Fifth National People's Congress was held. In order to celebrate the success of this great meeting, the citizens of Wenzhou organized a parade. And in 1980s, before Wenzhou Sports Center was built, People's Square was used for school sports meeting for quite a long time. And in 1984, the State's Council approved that Wenzhou to become one of the 14 coastal open cities in China. Then, in 1985, Dongfang Old Building was completed, which became the highest building in Zhejiang Province in 1980s. And in 1920s, Wenzhou Airport was opened and the Jingwei Railway was further improved. However, with the completion of land transportations, the waterway was closed in a large scale. After 2000, all waterways were closed, which meant the end of Wenzhou's water transportation industry. And in 2003, Wenzhou Peninsula Project started, and its purpose is to reclaim the sea to expand the land area and supplement land resources. And in 2005, in order to solve the parking problem of the government decided to demolish People's Square and build it into a parking lot. This is also the parking lot that we see today. Then Robin will continue to explain the changes in Wenzhou after 2000.
In the past 10 years, Wenzhou has entered a part of perpetual development. Combined with 100 years ago, many great changes have taken place here. Throughout history, we find that Wenzhou Port has always played a very important role here. During World War II, it was still one of the 3 points under Chinese country, so its importance was increasing day by day. But after the war, it began to decline. In 1955, when Zhejiang's coastal strait was rebuilt, it just started to recover. Decades later, it gradually became one of the important points in China now. Wenzhou dismantled the defensive wall and began to actively go global. In 1960s, except in the south of the Old Jiang River, there were scattered villages elsewhere. The dynasty of the house is also small. Many changes took place between 1970 and 2000, such as the expansion of Jiangxin Island and the construction of the Bay bus station, railway station, Ojiang Bridge, and airport. After 2000, Wenzhou began to develop into a new city. Highways were built and the bullet train station opened. Since 2010, Wenzhou has focused its development efforts mainly on the east. The government designed to replenish island resources by reusing the sea, and the Wenzhou Longwen Airport was expanded and transferred during this part. The beauty and the development potential of Wenzhou began to be paid attention to by the outside world. 2016, approved by the State Council, Wenzhou became a historical and cultural city. 2019, Wenzhou Light Rail Transit S1 line opened. In this center of history, Wenzhou seems to have not changed at all. In 1898, Su Huilian presided over the reconstructions of Chenxi Hill. This, one of the oldest churches in Wenzhou, is still the same as it was then. However, Wenzhou has changed a lot. Nowadays, people in Wenzhou wear bright colors and diverse styles. People's faces are filled with the love of life. Skyscrapers were built here. The line of the stars from 100 years ago passed a long journey to this line of today. But here is no longer a quiet darkness, but sparkling city lines, more brilliant than the stars. This is the central story of Wenzhou. Thank you for listening and hope you have a good time.